"Be my wife just for Christmas." Mafia boss begged her, then whispered his price against her neck. The snow in Northbridge did not fall gently. It struck the pavement like shards of ice, eager to bury the city in gray slush. Inside Giordano's, the most exclusive restaurant in the district, the air was warm and thick with the scent of truffle oil, roasted garlic, and expensive perfume. For Callie Ruiz, however, the warmth was suffocating. She balanced a heavy tray of crystal flutes and vintage wine, her arms trembling from exhaustion. It was her second double shift in 3 days. Her feet ached in the mandatory heels, a dull throb that synchronized with the pounding headache behind her eyes. Every smile she forced for a customer felt like it cracked a little more of her composure. Callie moved through the dining room with practiced invisibility, refilling water glasses and clearing plates. She caught snippets of conversation, mergers, acquisitions, vacations in the Maldives that felt like they belonged to a different galaxy. In her world, the only numbers that mattered were the ones printed in red ink on the hospital bills piled on her kitchen table. Her mother was gone, taken by an illness that had drained every cent of their savings and left Callie drowning in a sea of medical debt that felt impossible to escape. Finally, the dinner rush began to wane. Callie retreated to the kitchen, placing her tray on the metal counter with a sigh that rattled her ribs. "Table 4 needs their check, Ruiz," the floor manager barked, not looking up from his clipboard. "And fix your apron. You look a mess." "Yes, sir," Callie murmured, adjusting the white fabric at her waist. She pushed back out into the floor, unaware that her night was about to shatter. When her break finally came, Callie stepped out the back service door, needing 5 minutes of freezing air to numb the ache in her legs. She wrapped her thin coat tighter around herself, leaning against the brick wall. The alley was dimly lit, the snow piling up against the dumpsters. "I wondered when you would come out." The voice was gravelly and familiar in the worst way. Callie froze. She turned to see Mr. Henderson, her landlord, stepping out of the shadows. He was a thick-set man with a face permanently flushed red, and tonight he looked furious. "Mr. Henderson," Callie said, her voice tight, "I told you, I get paid on Friday. I will have the rent then." "You said that last week," Henderson spat. Stepping closer, the smell of stale tobacco clung to his coat. "And the week before, I am running a business. Callie, not a charity ward for orphans. I want my money, or I want you out." "Please," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the street where valets were bringing cars around for the departing guests. "Not here. I can't lose this job. I will get you the money." "You don't have it," Henderson shouted, his voice echoing off the brick. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the wool of her coat. "You are 3 months behind. I should throw your junk on the street tonight." Callie tried to pull away, panic rising in her throat. "Let go of me. Pay me what you owe." The back door of the restaurant opened, but it wasn't a coworker. A group of patrons had exited the side VIP entrance, their laughter dying instantly as they saw the scene. Henderson didn't care. He shook her arm, humiliating her, screaming about her poverty, her failures, her debt. Then, silence fell over the alley. It wasn't a natural silence. It was the kind that happens when a predator enters a clearing. A black sedan idled at the curb, the engine purring like a large cat. Standing beside the open rear door was a man who made the freezing air feel suddenly colder. He was tall, wearing a charcoal wool coat that cost more than Callie would earn in 5 years. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that looked carved from marble, sharp jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes that were dark, intelligent voids. Vincent Moretti. Everyone in Northbridge knew the name. Half the city feared him, the other half wanted to be him. He was the head of the Moretti crime family, though the papers called him a logistics magnate. Vincent did not move. He held a lit cigarette between gloved fingers, the smoke curling up into the night. He didn't step forward to save her. He didn't shout at Henderson. He simply watched. His gaze was fixed on Callie, dissecting her fear, her shame, and the way she held her chin up despite the tears threatening to spill. It was a look of terrifying intensity, as if he were reading a file on her life. Henderson noticed the audience and released Callie abruptly, smoothing his jacket. "Friday, Ruiz, or I change the locks." He stormed off into the night. Callie stood trembling, rubbing her arm. She looked up and met Vincent Moretti's eyes. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. He took a slow drag of his cigarette, exhaled, and then ducked into the back of his car. The door clicked shut, and the vehicle glided away into the snow. Callie wiped her face, swallowed her son, and went back to work. She had no other choice. An hour later, the restaurant was quiet. The lights dimmed. Callie was wiping down a table when the manager hurried over, looking pale. "Ruiz, the private lounge, now." "I thought the lounge was closed," she said, frowning. "Just go. He requested you specifically." Callie's stomach twisted. Had Henderson come back? Had a customer complained about the scene in the alley? She smoothed her skirt and walked toward the heavy oak doors at the back of the restaurant. She knocked once and entered. The private lounge was dimly lit by a fireplace that crackled softly. The walls were lined with expensive wines, and the leather booths were deep and dark. Sitting in the center booth, with a glass of whiskey untouched before him, was Vincent Moretti. He had removed his heavy coat. His suit was impeccable, tailored to fit broad shoulders. He didn't look up as she approached. He was studying the amber liquid in his glass. "Good evening, Mr. Moretti," Callie said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "Can I get you anything else?" Vincent slowly lifted his gaze. Up close, his eyes were even more unsettling, dark brown, almost black, framed by thick lashes. They were eyes that had seen too much violence. "Sit ye dold," he said. It wasn't a question. "I can't sit with customers. Sir, it's against policy. I own the building this restaurant leases," Vincent said calmly. "The policy is whatever I say it is. Sit." Callie hesitated, then slid into the booth opposite him, keeping a respectful distance. She folded her hands in her lap to hide their shaking. "You seem distressed, Miss Ruiz," he said. His voice was smooth, a deep baritone that vibrated in the quiet room. "It has been a long night," she deflected. $72,000, Vincent said. Callie blinked. "Excuse me?" "That is the remaining balance on your mother's medical accounts at Northbridge General, plus another $4,000 in back rent to Mr. Henderson, who I assume was the man assaulting you earlier." The blood drained from Callie's face. She felt exposed, violated. "How do you know that? Who are you to look into my life?" Vincent took a sip of his whiskey. "Information is my currency. Callie, I know you work 60 hours a week here and another 20 at the diner across town. I know you have sold most of your furniture. I know you are drowning." "If you brought me here to mock me," Callie said, standing up, her anger flaring over her fear, "then I will take the write-up for walking out." "Sit down," Vincent commanded. His voice didn't raise in volume, but the authority in it snapped her knees back into the leather seat. "I am not mocking you. I am assessing an asset." He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a sleek black business card on the table. It had no logo, just a name and an address in embossed silver lettering. "My driver will be outside your apartment tomorrow morning at 10, Vincent said. "Come to this address. Alone." "Why?" Callie asked, her breath hitching. "What do you want from me?" Vincent looked at her, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to her eyes. "I have a problem. You have a debt. Perhaps we can solve both." He finished his drink in one swallow, placed a $100 bill on the table, far more than the cost of the drink, and stood up. Without another word, he walked out of the lounge, leaving Callie alone with the crackling fire and the terrifying realization that the most dangerous man in the city knew exactly what she was worth. The next morning, the sky was a bruise of purple and gray. Callie stood on the curb outside her rundown apartment complex. A black SUV pulled up at exactly 10 in the morning. The driver, a massive man with a scar running through his eyebrow, opened the door for her without a word. The drive took 30 minutes, leading them out of the cramped city streets and up into the hills where the estates sat behind high iron gates. They pulled into a long driveway lined with snow-covered pines. The mansion at the end was staggering, a modern fortress of stone and glass that looked out over the city. Callie was led through a cavernous foyer, past abstract art that likely cost more than her lifetime earnings, and into a library. The room smelled of old paper and cedar. Vincent was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the gray horizon. "You came," he said, turning around. He wore a casual black sweater today, which somehow made him look even more imposing than the suit. It emphasized the muscle in his arms and chest. "I am curious," Callie admitted, clutching her purse, "and desperate, but mostly curious." "Desperation is a powerful motivator," Vincent noted. He walked over to a large mahogany desk and leaned against it, crossing his arms. "I will get straight to the point. My mother, Teresa, is dying, cancer. The doctors give her 3 months, perhaps less." Callie softened instantly. She knew that pain. "I'm so sorry." Vincent's expression remained stony. "She has one wish. She wants to know that I am settled, that I have found a woman who can handle this life, who can stand beside me. She worries that when she is gone, I will have no one." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I cannot give her a real marriage. My life, it does not allow for genuine attachments. They are weaknesses, but I can give her peace." He locked eyes with Callie. "I need a wife. Just for the Christmas season, 2 weeks. You will wear the ring, attend the family gatherings, smile at the right times, and convince her that I am happy." Callie stared at him, her mouth slightly open. "You want to hire me to play pretend, like some twisted holiday movie?" "In exchange," Vincent continued, ignoring her tone, "I will pay off the $72,000 you owe the hospital. I will pay Mr. Henderson your back rent, and I will give you $50,000 in cash to start over wherever you like when it is done." The numbers swam in Callie's head. It was freedom. It was a life raft in the middle of the ocean. But looking at Vincent, the lethal calm, the darkness in him, she felt a primal warning bell ringing in her mind. "And what do I have to do? Besides a smile?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You live here. You sleep in my room, though not in my bed, unless necessary for appearances. You learn the history of the family. You become Mrs. Moretti." "No," Callie said, stepping back. The reality of it was too heavy. "I can't. You are the Mafia. Vincent, everyone knows it. I can't get involved in your world." Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. "It is a business arrangement. Callie, you will be safe." "I can't," she repeated. "I'm sorry about your mother. I really am, but I can't sell myself to you." She turned and walked out. Vincent didn't try to stop her. The ride back to the city was silent. Callie felt proud of herself for standing her ground, but the pride evaporated the moment she reached her apartment building. Her key didn't work. She jiggled it, panic rising until she saw the neon orange paper taped to the door. Eviction notice. "No," she gasped, tearing the tape. "No, he said Friday." She pulled out her phone to call the restaurant, hoping to pick up an extra lunch shift to beg Henderson for more time. The phone rang once before the manager picked up. "Callie, don't come in." "What?" "Mr. Giordano saw what happened in the alley last night. He says it's bad for the image. Police cars, screaming landlords. We can't have it. You're let go. Your final check is in the mail." The line went dead. Callie stood in the freezing hallway, her phone slipping from her numb fingers. In the span of 1 hour, the floor had fallen out from under her life. She had no home. She had no job. She had $70,000 of debt and nowhere to go but the streets. She sank down against her apartment door, burying her face in her hands. The pride she had felt earlier seemed laughable now. Pride doesn't keep you warm. Pride didn't pay for your mother's dignity. Slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the black business card with the silver text. Callie returned to the mansion at 4 in the afternoon. The sky was already darkening. The same guard let her in. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Vincent was in the living room, pouring a drink. He didn't look surprised to see her. "I take it that circumstances have changed," he said, handing her a glass of water. Callie didn't take it. She stood in the center of the room, her coat still on, looking small and defeated. "The offer, does it still stand?" "It does." "Then I accept." Vincent set the glass down. He walked over to her, his movements predatory and graceful. He circled her slowly, making Callie feel like a piece of art being inspected for flaws. "If we do this," Vincent said, his voice dropping an octave, "there can be no hesitation. My mother is sharp. If she senses you are afraid of me, or that you are acting, she will know. The lie falls apart." "I can act," Callie said, lifting her chin defiantly. "I waited tables for 5 years. I pretend to like people every single day." "This is not waiting tables," Vincent murmured. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell the sandalwood and expensive tobacco on him. "We have to sell the chemistry, the desire." "I can do it," she insisted, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Prove it." Before Callie could process the command, Vincent stepped into her personal space. He reached out, his large hand sliding around the back of her neck, his thumb resting on the pulse point of her throat. His skin was warm, rough calluses against her soft flesh. Callie gasped, her eyes widening. She instinctively tried to pull back, but his grip held her firm, not painful, but possessive. "Don't pull away," he instructed softly. "A wife would not pull away." He lowered his head, his face inches from hers. Callie froze, trapped in his dark gaze. She could see the flecks of gold in his irises now. The air between them crackled with sudden, terrifying electricity. Vincent moved closer, tilting his head as if to kiss her. Callie's breath hitched, and her eyelids fluttered. He didn't kiss her lips, though. He moved past them, his mouth hovering right beside her ear. "You are stiff," he whispered, his voice a rough caress that sent a shiver violently down her spine. "You are terrified." His breath brushed against the sensitive skin of her neck, hot and heavy. Callie's knees felt weak. The scent of him was overwhelming her senses. "Relax," Vincent commanded, his lips grazing her earlobe. "Lean into me. Make me believe you want to be here, because if you can't make me believe it, you will never fool the rest of them." Slowly, shakily, Callie placed her hands on his chest. She could feel the solid wall of muscle beneath the cashmere sweater, the steady, slow beat of his heart. She forced herself to exhale, to tilt her head to the side, exposing her neck to him. "Good." He breathed against her skin. The vibration of his voice went straight to her core. He pulled back slowly, his hand lingering on her neck for a moment longer than necessary before dropping to his side. His eyes were darker now, the pupils blown wide. "That," Vincent said, his voice slightly rougher than before, "was a start. Go upstairs. Second door on the left. My team will be here in the morning to make you look the part." Callie nodded, unable to speak. She turned and walked toward the stairs, her legs feeling like jelly. She could feel his eyes on her back, burning like a brand. She had made a deal with the devil, and as she touched the spot on her neck where his breath still lingered, she realized the danger wasn't just the violence of his world, it was him. The transformation began at dawn, a chaotic whirlwind that swept through the silent guest room of the Moretti estate. Callie felt less like a human being and more like a canvas being aggressively primed for a masterpiece. A team of 3 women, moving with military precision, plucked, polished, and painted every inch of her. Her waitress uniform, smelling of stale grease and despair, had vanished, replaced by racks of silk, velvet, and cashmere that cost more than the building she used to live in, by noon. Callie stared into the full-length mirror and did not recognize the woman looking back. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, now cascaded and glossy, dark waves around her shoulders. Her skin glowed, the shadows under her eyes erased by expensive concealers. She wore a cream-colored day dress that hugged her waist and flared modestly at the hips, paired with pearls that felt heavy and cold against her collarbone. The door opened, and the air in the room seemed to compress. Vincent walked in. He stopped 3 steps inside the room, his hands in his pockets, his gaze sweeping over her with a critical, detached assessment. He didn't smile. He didn't compliment her. He walked a slow circle around her, inspecting the hem of the dress, the way her hair fell, the shoes she had been forced to wear. "The posture is wrong," he said flatly, coming to a halt in front of her. Callie stiffened, her chin jutting out. "I'm standing straight." "You are standing like a waitress, waiting for an order," Vincent corrected, shoulders back, chin down. "Just a fraction. You are not serving the room anymore. Callie, you own it. My wife does not wait for permission to exist." He stepped closer. The scent of his cologne, something woodsy and sharp, invading her personal space. "We have a charity ball tonight. It is the first test. If you look terrified, they will eat you alive. And if they eat you alive, my mother will know this is a lie before we even reach the hospital wing." "I can do this," Callie said, though her voice lacked the conviction she wanted. "I memorized the dossier. We met 6 months ago. I was working. You were dining. It was love at first sight. I am studying art history. I am an orphan." "The story is easy," Vincent said, his voice dropping. "Chemistry is the hard part." He reached out, and Callie flinched. Vincent's eyes narrowed. "That," he said, pointing a finger at her, "is exactly what will get us caught. You cannot flinch when I touch you. You are supposed to be in love with me. You should be leaning into my space, not looking for an exit. It is hard not to flinch when a crime boss reaches for you," Callie snapped, the stress of the last 24 hours bubbling over. Vincent's expression shifted. A flicker of amusement danced in his dark eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Then we practice until you stop shaking." For the next hour, the bedroom became a stage. Vincent was a demanding director. He taught her how to loop her arm through his, correcting her grip 3 times until it looked natural rather than desperate. He taught her how to stand when he was speaking to someone else, close enough to show unity, but angled slightly toward him, as if he were the magnetic center of her world. "Look at me," he commanded. Standing by the window, Callie looked. "No," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're looking at me like I am a math problem you are trying to solve. Look at me like you want me to take you upstairs." Callie felt a flush rise from her neck to her cheeks. "I don't know how to do that." "Improvise." He stepped forward, closing the distance until their bodies were nearly brushing. He took her hand, weaving his fingers through hers. The size of his hand swallowed hers completely, his grip firm and warm. "When we are in public," Vincent murmured, his voice rougher now, "I will touch you, often. It marks you as mine to the other men in the room, and it sells the story to the women. I might put my hand on the small of your back," he demonstrated, his large palm settling on the curve of her spine, the heat radiating through the fabric of her dress. Callie's breath hitched. "I might brush the hair from your face." His other hand came up, his knuckles grazing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. Callie forgot to breathe. The air between them grew heavy, charged with a sudden, undeniable current. Vincent wasn't looking at her posture anymore. He was looking at her mouth. "Better," he whispered, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "You stopped shaking." Callie swallowed hard. "I think I just forgot how to move." Vincent held her gaze for a second longer, the intensity of it making her knees weak, before he abruptly pulled away and checked his watch. The cold mask slammed back down over his features. "Get changed," he said, turning his back to her. "The car leaves in 40 minutes. Wear the blue dress." The charity ball was a kaleidoscope of diamonds, champagne, and superficial laughter held in the grand ballroom of the Northbridge Ritz. When the doors opened and Callie stepped through them with Vincent, the room seemed to tilt on its axis. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that left her shoulders bare, the fabric pooling around her feet like liquid night. Vincent wore a tuxedo that fit him as if he had been born in it. As they descended the grand staircase, Callie felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes landing on them. "Breathe," Vincent murmured against her ear, his hand tightening reassuringly on her waist. "They are just sharks. You are with the killer whale." Callie let out a shaky laugh, and the sound seemed to break the spell. They moved into the crowd. The night was a blur of introductions. Men with cold eyes and expensive suits shook Vincent's hand, their gazes flickering over Callie with curiosity and envy. Vincent played the part of the devoted husband with terrifying ease. He kept her close, his hand constantly finding her, resting on her hip, guiding her through the crush, his fingers interlaced with hers. Whenever she felt overwhelmed, he was there, a solid wall of protection. He deflected intrusive questions with charming but firm answers, steering the conversation away from her past and back to the safe, fabricated story of their romance. "She's the only thing that makes sense in this city," Vincent told a rival associate, a man named Julian Price, while looking down at Callie with an expression of such profound adoration that she almost believed it herself. "You are a lucky man, Moretti," Julian said, his eyes lingering on Callie a moment too long. "I didn't think you had a heart to give." "I found it recently," Vincent replied, his tone light, but his grip on Callie's waist tightened possessively. By the time they left, Callie's feet were screaming in her heels, and her facial muscles ached from smiling. The silence of the limousine on the ride back to the penthouse was a blessing. Vincent loosened his tie, leaning his head back against the leather seat, watching her from beneath half-lowered lids. "You did well," he said quietly. "I felt like a fraud," Callie admitted, rubbing her temples. "They were all looking at me like they were trying to find the cracks. They didn't find any. You were radiant." The compliment was simple, devoid of his usual sarcasm. Callie looked at him, surprised, but he was staring out the window at the passing city lights. When they reached the penthouse, the sprawling top-floor apartment Vincent used when he wasn't at the estate, the atmosphere shifted. The adrenaline of the performance was fading, leaving behind a raw, exposed vulnerability. Callie stumbled slightly as she walked into the living room, wincing as her heel twisted on the marble floor. "Sit," Vincent commanded gently, pointing to the plush velvet sofa. Callie collapsed onto it, letting out a long sigh. "I don't think I can ever stand up again." She reached down to unbuckle the strap of her stiletto, but Vincent was there before she could move. He dropped to one knee in front of her, the movement fluid and unexpected. "Vincent, you don't have to—" "Hush!" He took her ankle in his hand. His touch was searing hot against her skin. With methodical care, he undid the buckle of the left shoe and slid it off, setting it aside. Then he took her foot in his hands, his thumbs pressing firmly into the aching arch. Callie gasped, her head falling back against the sofa cushions. The relief was instant, bordering on pleasurable. "Oh my God!" Vincent didn't speak. He moved to the other foot, removing the shoe and massaging the tension away. It was an intimate act, far more intimate than the public displays at the ball. He was kneeling at her feet, a man who commanded armies of criminals, tending to her pain with a reverence that confused her. He looked up, his hands still wrapped around her ankles. His eyes were dark, searching. The air in the room grew thick again, charged with that same electricity from the bedroom earlier, but heavier now, dangerous. "Callie," he said, her name sounding different on his tongue, less like a contract, more like a prayer. "Vincent," she whispered, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. For a moment, neither of them moved. The distance between them was filled with unsaid words and the ghost of the performance that was starting to feel terrifyingly real. Then, Vincent cleared his throat and stood up abruptly, the mask sliding back into place. "Get some sleep," he said, his voice rough. "We will see my mother tomorrow. That will be the real test." He walked toward his bedroom without looking back, leaving Callie sitting on the sofa, her skin still burning where his hands had been. The medical wing of the Moretti estate was sterile and quiet, a stark contrast to the opulence of the rest of the house. Teresa Moretti lay in a large bed, surrounded by machines that hummed softly. She was frail, her skin like parchment, but her eyes were identical to Vincent's, sharp, intelligent, and unyielding. She watched Callie walk in with the suspicion of a woman who had survived decades in a brutal world. "So," Teresa rasped, her voice weak but commanding, "this is the girl. This is Callie. Mama," Vincent said, walking to the bedside and kissing his mother's forehead. "My wife—" Callie stepped forward, clutching her purse. "It is nice to meet you. Mrs. Moretti." Teresa narrowed her eyes. "You are young. You look soft. Can you handle him? He's not an easy man." "I am learning," Callie said honestly, glancing at Vincent. "She is stronger than she looks," Vincent said. He reached out and took Callie's hand, pulling her closer to the bed. "She stands up to me. No one else does that." Teresa studied them. She looked at their joined hands, at the way Vincent's body angled protectively toward Callie, at the thumb he was unconsciously running over Callie's knuckles. "He looks at you like his father used to look at me," Teresa murmured, her expression softening for the first time. "I was worried he would end up alone, a king in an empty castle." "I am not alone," Vincent said softly. "To pass the time." Teresa asked to watch old home videos. A nurse set up the projector, and soon the wall was flickering with grainy footage of a much younger world. Callie sat on the edge of the bed, Vincent standing behind her with his hand on her shoulder. On the screen, a young boy with messy dark hair was laughing, chasing a golden retriever through the snow. He looked happy, innocent. "He was 8 there," Teresa said, a sad smile touching her lips. "Before life took him." Callie looked up at Vincent. He was watching the screen with a look of profound melancholy. The hardness around his mouth had vanished in the flickering light. She didn't see the mafia boss who had threatened her landlord or the cold strategist who had bought her debts. She saw a man who missed a time when he was just a boy in the snow. She reached up and covered his hand with hers. He didn't pull away. Instead, he squeezed her fingers, a silent acknowledgement of the moment they were sharing that evening, after Teresa had fallen asleep. Vincent and Callie ate a quiet dinner in the main hall. The fireplace roared, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. Outside, the wind howled, battering the stone walls, but inside was warm and still. Vincent poured 2 glasses of red wine and walked over to the record player in the corner. A moment later, the scratchy, soulful sound of a jazz ballad filled the room. "Dance with me," he said. It wasn't a command this time. It was an invitation. Callie stood, leaving her wine on the table. She walked into his arms as if she had done it 1,000 times. Vincent pulled her flush against him, one hand holding hers, the other resting firmly on her waist. They moved slowly to the music, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the slide of their feet on the rug. Callie rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heart. It was beating fast. "She liked you," Vincent said quietly, his chin resting on the top of her head. "She believed it. I liked her too," Callie murmured. "She loves you very much. She is the only reason I am still breathing." Vincent pulled back slightly so he could look at her face. The firelight washed over them, turning his eyes into pools of molten gold. His hand slid from her waist up to her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. The air left the room. The music seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the heavy, ragged sound of their breathing. Vincent lowered his head. Callie tilted hers back, her lips parting slightly. She wanted him to kiss her. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't pretending anymore. She wanted the taste of him, the danger of him. His lips hovered inches from hers. She could feel the heat of his breath. He closed his eyes, leaning in, and for a second their noses brushed. Then he stopped. His hand froze on her jaw, a muscle feathered in his cheek. He pulled back, opening his eyes. They were filled with a conflict so raw it hurt to look at. "Vincent?" she whispered. He stepped back, breaking the contact. The loss of his warmth made her shiver. "Oh, this is just pretend, right?" she asked, her voice trembling, needing him to deny it, needing him to say that what just happened was real. Vincent looked at her for a long moment. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, debating whether to jump. He didn't answer. "Good night, Callie," he said abruptly. He turned and walked toward the French doors that led to the balcony, stepping out into the freezing night air without a coat. Callie stood alone by the fire, touching her lips, feeling the ghost of a kiss that never happened. Hours later, the house was silent. Callie was asleep in the guest room, curled under a heavy down comforter, down the hall, in the master suite. Vincent sat in a leather armchair in the dark. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on the side table. His phone was in his hand, the screen glowing in the darkness. He was looking at a photo. It was a candid shot the photographer had taken at the ball, one he wasn't supposed to have. In the picture, Callie was laughing at something he had whispered to her. Her head was thrown back, her eyes crinkled with genuine joy, her hand resting possessively on his chest. He zoomed in on her smile. He traced the curve of her lips on the glass screen with his thumb. "Just for Christmas," he whispered to the empty room, a reminder to himself. But even as he said the words, they felt like ashes in his mouth. He knew, with a sinking dread in his gut, that he was already far deeper than he had ever intended to go. The transition was subtle, like the slow creep of frost across a window pane. Over the next few days, Callie Ruiz ceased to be a visitor in the Moretti mansion and began to haunt its halls as if she belonged there. The staff, initially stiff and formal, had softened toward her. She learned that the housekeeper, Maria, had a grandson in college, and that the stoic head of security preferred his coffee black with 2 sugars. The grand, echoing rooms that had once intimidated her now felt familiar. She wore the silk blouses and tailored trousers Vincent's team had selected, not as a costume, but as a second skin. She was playing the part of Mrs. Moretti so well that sometimes, in the quiet moments between the chaos, she forgot it was a performance. That illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. Callie returned to her guest suite after a lunch with Teresa, feeling flushed with the success of maintaining the charade. She hummed a soft tune as she pushed open the heavy mahogany door. She stopped dead in her tracks. There, lying in the center of the Persian rug, was a plain white envelope. It had no stamp, no return address, just her name, Callie, scrawled in a handwriting that made her blood turn to ice water. It wasn't the elegant script of the wedding invitations she had helped design. It was jagged, aggressive, the letters pressing deep into the paper. Her breath hitched, trapped in her throat. She looked around the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. The windows were locked. The door had been closed. This was a fortress, guarded by men with guns and earpieces. How has this gotten here? Trembling, she knelt and picked it up. She tore it open. The note inside was brief, written on a scrap of torn notebook paper. "Did you think a fancy dress would hide you? You owe me. Cal, I'm coming to collect." The room spun. The walls seemed to close in, the scent of fresh lilies from the vase on the vanity suddenly smelling like funeral flowers. "Callie?" Vincent's voice was sharp, cutting through the fog of her panic. She hadn't heard him enter. He stood in the doorway, his jacket discarded, his tie loosened. He took one look at her pale face, at the way her hand shook as she clutched the paper, and the relaxed demeanor vanished. In a split second, he was across the room. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a lethal register. Callie couldn't speak. She simply held the paper out to him. Vincent took it. His eyes scanned the words, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. When he looked up, his eyes were black, void of any light. "Who sent this?" I don't know how it got here," she whispered, backing away until her legs hit the edge of the bed. "The security? You said the security was perfect." "Answer the question," Vincent snapped, stepping closer. He wasn't yelling, but the intensity radiating off him was terrifying. "Who is he? Who thinks they have the right to threaten you in my home?" Callie wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold her shattering composure together. Eddie Caro." Vincent went still. "The ex-boyfriend." "He's not just an ex," she said, her voice cracking. He is violent. Vincent, he controlled everything, who I talked to, where I went, what I wore. He went to prison 2 years ago for aggravated assault against a guy who looked at me the wrong way in a bar. He got out 2 months ago." Vincent crumpled the note in his fist. "Why did you not tell me this when I asked about your debts, when I vetted you?" "Because I thought I was safe," Callie cried. tears finally spilling over. I moved. I changed my number. I thought he wouldn't find me, and I didn't think he could get to you. He didn't get to me, Vincent said, his jaw tight. He got a maid or a gardener. Someone slipped this under the door for $100. He turned on his heel, marching toward the door. Do not leave this room. Vincent, wait. He stopped, looking back at her. His expression was unreadable, a mask of cold fury. Please, she whispered, don't hurt him. If you hurt him, it just makes it worse. He is crazy. If you push him, he snaps. Vincent walked back to her, stopping inches away. He reached out, gripping her chin gently but firmly, forcing her to look at him. You are under the impression that I am a civilized man. Callie, that is your mistake. No one threatens what is mine. I am not yours, she breathed, the words trembling. Not really. Vincent stared at her, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. For the next 2 weeks, you are, and I protect my investments. The shift in the house was immediate. The invisible security became visible. 2 men in dark suits were stationed outside Callie's door. Another shadowed her whenever she moved from room to room. Vincent claimed it was part of the act, a show of dominance and protection for the new bride, but Callie saw through it. He was angry, and he was worried. That evening, the tension in the house was palpable. To diffuse it, Teresa suggested they decorate the Christmas tree in the Great Hall. It was a massive blue spruce that reached the ceiling, smelling of pine and winter. Vincent tried to beg off, claiming work, but one look from his mother sent him climbing the ladder to hang the star. Callie stood at the bottom, handing him ornaments. The domesticity of it felt surreal. Here was a man who could order a hit without blinking, carefully placing a fragile glass angel on a pine branch. To the left, Callie instructed, pointing. It is lopsided. Vincent looked down at her from the ladder. I do not do lopsided. Well, the tree disagrees with you. A faint smirk touched his lips. He adjusted the ornament. Better? Perfect. When he climbed down, the mood had shifted. The fear of the afternoon had receded, replaced by the warm glow of the fire and the scent of pine. Teresa had retired early, leaving them alone in the vast, flickering room. Callie picked up a silver bauble, turning it over in her hands. Thank you, she said quietly. For the guards. I know I said I didn't want them, but I feel safer. Vincent took the ornament from her hand and placed it on a branch. You should not have to feel safe in your own home. You should just be safe. He turned to face her. The firelight danced over his features, softening the harsh angles of his face. He looked tired. The weight of his empire, his mother's illness, and now this threat. It was all etched into the lines around his eyes. You look exhausted, Callie whispered, without thinking. She reached up, her fingers grazing his temple. Vincent caught her wrist. His grip was warm, not restraining. He didn't push her away. Instead, he pulled her closer, until her chest brushed against his shirt. Callie, he murmured, his voice a low rumble. Everything around them faded, the crackling fire, the glittering tree, the snow falling silently outside the tall windows. There was only him. The darkness of his eyes, the heat of his body, the scent of sandalwood and danger. Tell me to stop, he said, his gaze dropping to her lips. No, she breathed. He lowered his head slowly, giving her every chance to run. When she didn't, he closed the distance. The kiss was not like the one she had imagined. It wasn't forceful or demanding. It was slow, deep, and trembling with restrained power. His lips moved against hers with a reverence that made her knees weak. He tasted whiskey and longing. Callie let out a soft sound, her hands sliding up his chest to grip his shoulders. Vincent groaned low in his throat, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly so she was flush against him. He kissed her like he was drowning, and she was the only air left in the world. It was a kiss of desperation, of 2 people pretending to be something they weren't, until the lines blurred so completely they disappeared. He pulled away slowly, resting his forehead against hers. His breathing was ragged. His hands were still clutching her waist, as if he was afraid she would vanish if he let go. "Why?" he whispered, his voice rough. "Why does this feel so damn real?" Callie opened her eyes, her lashes fluttering. "Maybe because we are tired of lying." Vincent stared at her, his eyes searching hers for the truth. He looked like he wanted to say something, to confess something, but the walls of his life were too high. "Come," he said abruptly. Taking her hand, he led her upstairs, but not to the guest room. He led her to the master's suite. "Vincent, the guards are outside the door," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "But if Caro has a way into this house, I am not leaving you alone in a room down the hall. You sleep here tonight." The master bedroom was stark, masculine, and vast. Vincent tossed a pillow onto the far side of the massive, king-sized bed. "I will stay on my side," he promised, turning his back to unbutton his shirt. "You have my word." Callie changed into her silk pajamas in the bathroom and emerged hesitantly. Vincent was already in bed, wearing only a t-shirt and sleep pants, staring at the ceiling. She climbed in, keeping a foot of distance between them. The sheets were cold, but his body heat radiated across the mattress. A furnace in the dark, they lay in silence for a long time. "He hurt you," Vincent said into the darkness. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Callie whispered. "Physically, sometimes. But mostly, he just made me feel small, like I was nothing without him." She felt Vincent shift. His hand moved across the space between them, finding hers under the covers. He interlaced their fingers, his grip tight and solid. "You are not nothing," he said fiercely. "You are the strongest thing in this house." Callie turned her head to look at him. In the moonlight filtering through the curtains, his face was relaxed, the usual tension smoothed away by sleep's approach. He looked peaceful, young, even. She squeezed his hand back. "Good night, Vincent. Good night, Mrs. Moretti." The peace did not last. The following evening, the Moretti family gathered for their annual pre-Christmas dinner. It was a larger affair than the intimate nights with Teresa. Uncles, cousins, and business associates filled the dining hall. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the heavy scent of roasting meat. Callie sat at Vincent's right hand, playing her role. She laughed at the uncles' bad jokes, complimented the wives on their jewelry, and kept her hand resting lightly on Vincent's arm. But she could feel the eyes of one man boring her. Matteo Moretti, Vincent's cousin and second in command. He was a sharp-featured man with a smile that never reached his eyes. He had been watching her all night, dissecting her performance. After dinner, while Vincent was cornered by an associate discussing shipping lanes, Callie escaped to the terrace for a breath of fresh air. She wasn't alone for long. "Enjoying the view. Cousin?" Callie turned. Matteo was leaning against the stone railing, swirling a glass of brandy. "It is beautiful," she said politely. "It is expensive," Matteo corrected. He pushed off the railing and walked toward her. "Everything here is expensive. The wine, the house, the protection." He paused, looking her up and down with a sneer. "Even the women." Callie stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't play the innocent with me," Matteo spat. "I looked into you. Callie Ruiz, waitress, dropout, daughter of a bankrupt dead woman. You are a nobody, a stray cat Vincent picked up to keep his mother happy." "Matteo," she warned, stepping back. "He is paying you, isn't he?" Matteo laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "Or maybe you are paying him in other ways, but don't make the mistake of thinking you belong here. Vincent is a king. You are just a rented distraction. Once Teresa is in the ground, you will be back pouring coffee before the dirt settles." Callie felt the tears sting her eyes before she could stop them. The cruelty of his words struck the exact insecurity she had been nursing, that she was just a transaction, a paid liar. She pushed past him, running back inside, blinded by tears. She found a quiet alcove near the library and sank onto a velvet bench, trying to stifle her sobs. "Callie?" She looked up. Vincent stood there, his expression darkening instantly as he saw her tears. "What happened?" he demanded, kneeling in front of her. "It is nothing," she choked out, wiping her face. I I miss my mom." "You are a terrible liar," Vincent said softly. He reached out, cupping her face in his hands, wiping a tear away with his thumb. "Who was it? Was it Mateo?" She didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. Vincent's face hardened into stone. He stood up, ready to storm back into the hall, but Callie grabbed his hand. "Don't," she begged. "He is right. I am nobody. I am just a waitress playing dress-up. He said, I am just a distraction until your mother dies." Vincent stopped. He looked down at her, and the anger in his eyes shifted into something else, pain and fierce protectiveness. He sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. He cradled her close, his chin resting on her hair. "Mateo is a fool," Vincent whispered into her hair. "He sees the world in columns of debit and credit. He doesn't see you." He pulled back to look at her. "He doesn't decide who belongs here, and he certainly doesn't decide who I love." The word hung in the air. Love. Vincent seemed to realize what he had said, his eyes widening slightly, but he didn't take it back. He didn't correct himself to say, "Who I pretend to love," before Callie could ask him what he meant. The library door burst open. It was the head of security, looking grim. "Boss, we have a problem." Vincent stood up, pulling Callie with him, his body instantly shifting into a protective stance. "What is it?" Police scanner picked up a break-in at an apartment complex on 4th Street. "Miss Ruiz's old address," Callie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "The landlord called it in." The guard continued. "The place was tossed, furniture slashed, but he didn't take anything." "He left a message," Vincent guessed, his voice devoid of emotion. The guard nodded. He pulled out a tablet and showed them a photo taken by a contact on the scene. It was Callie's old bedroom wall. The wallpaper was shredded. Scrawled across the plaster in thick, blood-red markers were 2 words that made Callie's knees buckle. "Mine, always." Callie buried her face in Vincent's chest, a sob racking her body. "He's going to find me. He's going to kill me." Vincent wrapped his arms around her, holding her so tight it was almost painful. He looked at the photo on the tablet, and the look on his face was one of absolute, terrifying destruction. "He will never touch you again," Vincent vowed, his voice low and vibrating with a dark promise. "I don't care if he hides in a hole in the ground. I don't care who he is working with." He looked at the guard. "Find him. Turn this city upside down. If you have to burn Northbridge to the ground to find this rat, then bring me the matches." Vincent looked down at Callie, lifting her chin. His eyes were ablaze with a fire that was both terrifying and undeniably reassuring. "I will burn the city if he tries to take you from me," he whispered against her forehead. "That is not a part of the act. Callie, that is a promise." The safe house was a fortress disguised as a hunting lodge, buried deep within the pine forests 2 hours north of the city. The windows were bulletproof glass, the perimeter was lined with sensors, and the only road leading up to the heavy iron gates was watched by armed men in the tree line. It was a place designed for war, not a honeymoon. Vincent drove the black SUV himself, his knuckles white on the leather steering wheel. Beside him, Callie watched the snow-covered trees blur past. She had not spoken since they left the city. The image of the blood-red writing on her bedroom wall still burned into her retinas. "We are here," Vincent announced, his voice tight. He pulled the car into a subterranean garage. As the engine died, the silence that descended was heavy. Callie shivered. Though the car was warm, Vincent was out of his seat in an instant, opening her door and offering his hand. He did not let go once she took it, pulling her close to his side as they walked into the main house. Inside, the safe house was stark but luxurious, filled with dark leather furniture and roaring fireplaces. But it was not empty. Vincent's inner circle was already there. 3 men stood around a heavy oak table covered in maps and tablets. There was Rocco, Vincent's oldest friend and enforcer, a man built like a vending machine. There was Silas, the strategist with wire-rimmed glasses, and there was Mateo, who still looked at Callie with open disdain. "We have eyes on Caro," Rocco rumbled, acknowledging Vincent with a nod but ignoring Callie. He went underground. We lost him near the docks. He has help, Vincent said, shedding his coat. He kept Callie tucked under his arm. A low-level ex-con does not evade my security team without professional backing. I told you, Mateo sneered, tossing a file onto the table. It is Julian Price. He's been looking for a way to squeeze our territory in the South Ward. He's using the girl's baggage as a wedge. Watch your tone, Mateo, Vincent warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. I am speaking the truth. Mateo slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses of scotch jump. We are exposing the entire organization to a waitress. We should cut her loose, give Caro what he wants, and Price loses his leverage. The room went deathly silent. Vincent released Callie and took a step toward his cousin, his hand drifting toward the gun holstered beneath his jacket. If you suggest handing my wife over to a butcher again, Vincent said softly, I will forget that we share blood. She is not your wife, Mateo shouted, his face flushing red. It is a job, a contract, and it is costing us everything. Rocco shifted uncomfortably, and Silas looked down at his tablet. The tension was a physical weight, a lit match hovering over a pool of gasoline. Callie stepped forward. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but she had spent 5 years waiting tables at Giordano's. She had de-escalated drunk senators, angry chefs, and entitlement-fueled tantrums. She knew how to handle men who were running on testosterone and fear. She picked up the bottle of scotch from the sidebar and walked calmly to the table. She didn't look at Vincent. She looked at Mateo. You are scared, she said quietly. Mateo blinked, taken aback. Excuse me? Callie poured a measure of amber liquid into his empty glass. Her hand was steady. You are scared because you think Vincent is compromised. You think he is making emotional decisions that will get you all killed. You are loyal to him, and you are terrified that his loyalty to me is a weakness. She slid the glass toward him. She picked up the pitcher of water and filled Rocco's glass, then Silas's. But if you are shouting, she continued, her voice level and calm, you are not thinking. And if you are not thinking, then Julian Price has already won. He wants you divided. He wants you to fight each other so you don't see him coming. She set the pitcher down and looked Mateo in the eye. I know I am a liability. I know I don't belong here, but I am here. And shouting about it won't change the fact that Vincent gave his word. If his words mean nothing to you, then why do you follow him? Mateo stared at her, his mouth slightly open. He looked at the glass of scotch, then at Vincent, and finally back at Callie. The anger drained out of his posture, replaced by a grudging, bewildered respect. She has a point, Rocco grunted, breaking the silence. He took a sip of his water. We're shouting like children. Vincent watched her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burned with a pride so intense it made Callie's knees weak. Sit down, Vincent commanded the room. We plan, no more shouting. The meeting lasted for hours. By the time the men dispersed to their quarters or guard posts, it was past midnight. Callie felt like her bones were made of lead. She retreated to the master bathroom, needing to wash the day away. She turned the shower on as hot as it would go, steam instantly filling the large marble enclosure. She stepped in, letting the water beat against her skin, scalding and purifying. She didn't mean to cry. It started as a hitch in her breath, then a tremble in her shoulders, until she was sobbing, her forehead pressed against the cold tile wall. The terror of the bloody message, the humiliation of Mateo's words, the overwhelming reality that her life was on the line, it all crashed down on her. She didn't hear the door open. She didn't hear the glass door of the shower slide back. She only knew he was there when she felt the warmth of a body behind her, blocking the spray. Callie, Vincent whispered. She tried to cover her face, ashamed of her weakness. Don't look at me. Please. I can't stop. Don't stop, he murmured. He didn't leave. He stepped fully into the spray, his white dress shirt instantly plastering to his chest, his trousers soaking through. He didn't care. He reached out and turned her around, his hands gripping her waist to steady her. Water streamed down his face, dripping from his dark hair, but his eyes were locked on hers. There was no coldness in them now. There was only a raw, open reverence that took her breath away. "I have got you," he promised, pulling her against his soaked chest. "I have got you." Callie buried her face in the crook of his neck. Clutching his wet shirt, he held her while she cried, his large hand stroking her hair, murmuring soft words in Italian that she didn't understand but felt in her soul. As her sobs subsided, the atmosphere in the small, steam-filled space shifted. The comfort turned into something heavier, hotter. Vincent pulled back slightly to look at her. He reached up, tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb, wiping away water and tears. "You were incredible tonight," he whispered, his voice rough. "You silenced a room of killers with a look. I have never seen anything like it." "I was terrified," she admitted. "That makes it braver." He lowered his head, his lips brushing hers, a question, not a demand. Callie answered by winding her arms around his neck and pressing herself against him. The kiss was electric, amplified by the heat of the water and the danger of the night. Vincent groaned, a low, guttural sound, and kissed her deeper, his hands sliding down her back to pull her hips flush against his. There was no pretense left. The contract, the debt, the dying mother, it all dissolved in the steam. "Callie," he gasped against her mouth, "if we do this, there is no going back. I cannot pretend anymore. Not with you. I don't want to go back," she whispered, her hands fumbling with the wet buttons of his shirt. "I want you. Just you." Vincent stripped off his wet clothes with impatient hands, and then he was skin to skin with her, warm and solid and real. He lifted her up, pressing her against the tile wall, his touch worshipping every inch of her. They made love under the falling water, slow and desperate. It wasn't the rough, possessive taking of a mafia boss. It was the desperate connection of a man who had found the one thing he couldn't live without. Every touch was a confession, every kiss a vow. When he finally claimed her, he watched her face as if he were memorizing her, his eyes filled with an emotion that looked terrifyingly like love. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains, painting the room in shades of gray and gold. Callie woke to the feeling of Vincent's arm heavy across her waist. She turned to look at him. He was awake, staring at the ceiling, his other arm tucked behind his head. The scars on his torso were visible in the daylight, a jagged line on his ribs, a puncture mark on his shoulder, a map of violence. "My brother's name was Santino," Vincent said quietly, without looking at her. Callie stayed still, knowing this was a gift she had to accept delicately. Teresa mentioned him once. She said he died young. He was 22. I was 24. Vincent turned his head, his dark eyes meeting hers on the pillow. There was a war for territory, much like now. I was the careful one, the planner, Santino. He was fired, he was impulsive. He went to a meeting that I told him was a trap. He paused, swallowing hard. I was 10 minutes late. 10 minutes. If I had driven faster, if I had not double-checked the perimeter, maybe I would have been there to cover him. I found him in the alley. He died in my arms. Callie reached out, tracing the scar on his ribs. It wasn't your fault. Vincent, it is always the leader's fault, he corrected grimly. After that, I shut down. I decided that caring was a liability. If you do not love anything, you cannot lose anything. I built this empire on ice. He took her hand, kissing her knuckles. And then a waitress with sad eyes and a mountain of debt walked into my lounge, and the ice started to crack. Callie felt tears prick her eyes again. Eddie didn't just hit me, she whispered, offering her own truth in return. He erased me. He made me quit my job. He took my phone. He told me that I was stupid, that I was ugly, that no one else would ever want me. He made me believe that I needed him to survive. She squeezed Vincent's hand. The night I left, he passed out drunk. I didn't have a plan. I just grabbed my backpack and my mother's Bible. It was the only thing of hers I had left. I climbed out the fire escape in the middle of January. I walked 6 miles to the bus station in the snow. I didn't have a coat. I just kept telling myself, keep walking, or you die. Vincent pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her hair. You are a survivor. Callie, You are stronger than any man I have ever known." "I don't feel strong," she mumbled against his skin. "That is because you do not see yourself through my eyes." A sharp knock on the door shattered the quiet intimacy. "Boss?" Rocco's voice came through the wood, urgent and grim. "We have a situation." Vincent was dressed and armed in 5 minutes. The transformation from the tender lover to the cold dawn was instant, but Callie saw the hesitation in him now, the way his gaze lingered on her. In the main room, Rocco had a phone in his hand. "It is Julian Price. He wants a sit-down. Noon. The old shipyard in the East End." "It is a trap," Matteo said immediately. "Of course it is a trap," Vincent snapped, checking the magazine of his pistol. "But he says he has Caro, and he says if I don't show, he sends Caro to the press to tell the world how I hired an actress to fool a dying woman." "Let him talk," Silas argued. "Who cares about the press?" "It is not just the press," Vincent said, looking at Callie. "If the marriage is exposed as a fake, the other families will see weakness. They will circle. And Caro, if Price has him, he will let him loose on Callie the moment I refuse. I am going," Vincent decided. He turned to Callie, grabbing her shoulders. "You stay here. Do not leave this house. Rocco stays with you. The safe house is compromised if we move you." "No," Callie said, clutching his lapels. "Vincent, he knows about us. He knows everything. If you go there, he is going to kill you." "He won't kill me. He wants territory. I will give him the South Ward if I have to." "That is suicide for the business," Matteo protested. "I don't care about the business," Vincent roared, silencing the room. "I care about her." He kissed Callie hard, a desperate, bruising kiss. "Stay here. I will come back for you." He turned and marched out, his men trailing him. The heavy door slammed shut. Callie stood there, her heart racing. She looked at Rocco, who was checking his weapon by the window. "He's walking into a slaughter," she said. "He knows," Rocco said gruffly, "but he won't risk you." Callie looked down at her hands. She thought about the girl who had climbed out of the fire escape in the snow, the girl who had walked 6 miles to survive. She wasn't that girl anymore. She wasn't going to run while someone else bled for her. She looked at the keys to the supply truck sitting on the side table. "Rocco," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "I think I left my phone in the bedroom. Can you check?" Rocco sighed and turned toward the hallway. The moment he was out of sight, Callie grabbed the keys and bolted for the garage. The shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal and rotting wood. The wind whipped off the harbor, cutting through Callie's coat as she crouched behind a stack of shipping crates. She had parked the truck a mile away and ran the rest. Slipping through a hole in the fence she had spotted from the road, she could see them. Vincent stood in the center of a clearing, flanked by Silas and 2 other guards. Opposite him stood a man in a cream-colored suit who looked out of place in the grime. Julian Price, and beside Julian, twitching and looking erratic, was Eddie. Seeing him made bile rise in Callie's throat. He looked thinner, his eyes wild, a knife tucked visibly into his belt. "You look good, Vincent," Julian called out, his voice smooth and oily. "Marriage suits you, though I hear the honeymoon is a bit staged." "Cut the theatrics, Julian," Vincent said coldly. "You want the South Ward? Take it. Hand over the rat and we walk away." Eddie laughed, a high, manic sound. "You hear that? He calls me a rat. I am the one who owned her first. Moretti! She is mine." "She was never yours," Vincent said, his hand hovering near his gun. "You just broke her so she would not leave. That is not ownership. That is cowardice." "Touching," Julian drawled. He took a step forward. "But here is the thing. Vincent, I don't just want the South Ward. I want the docks. And I want the distribution routes." "You are overreaching," Vincent growled. "Am I?" Julian smirked. "You have a dying mother who thinks you are a saint. You have a reputation built on iron and blood. If I release the audio recording I have of your wife admitting she was hired, if I let Eddie here pay her a visit and stream it to the world, what happened to the great Vincent Moretti then?" Vincent went rigid. Julian took a step closer, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You forget, Vincent In our world, nothing fake stays sweet forever. You fell in love with the prop, and that is going to cost you everything." From her hiding spot, Callie saw Eddie pull the knife. She saw the signal Julian gave to the men hidden in the rafters. It was an ambush. They weren't going to negotiate. They were going to kill him. Callie didn't think, she didn't plan. She saw a rusted metal pipe on the ground next to her. She grabbed it, the cold steel biting into her palm, and she stepped out from the shadows. "Let him go! Julian!" she screamed, her voice echoing across the shipyard. Every head turned. Vincent's eyes went wide with horror. "Callie, run!" he roared, but it was too late. Eddie saw her. A twisted grin of pure possession split his face, and he broke into a run straight for her. The escape from the shipyard had been a blur of screaming tires and suppressing fire. Rocco had managed to pull the SUV between Callie and the charging Eddie Caro just in time, hauling her into the back seat before speeding away. But the relief was short-lived. The city of Northbridge, usually a grid of snow-dusted streets and holiday lights, had turned into a war zone. They were crossing the bridge back toward the secured district when the world exploded. A dark sedan swerved out of the blind spot, engine roaring. The passenger window rolled down, revealing the terrifying muzzle of an automatic weapon. "Get down!" Vincent roared. He didn't reach for his gun first. He reached for her, in a single fluid motion. Vincent threw his body over Callie's, pressing her face into the leather seat, shielding her with the solid weight of his own frame. The glass shattered. The sound was deafening, a chaotic symphony of screeching metal and popping gunfire. Shards of safety glass rained down on Vincent's back, but he didn't flinch. He was a human wall, his hand cupping the back of her head, holding her down as the car swerved violently. "Rocco, hold the line," Vincent shouted over the noise. He shifted, finally drawing his weapon, with cold, terrifying precision. He raised the gun through the shattered window. He didn't spray bullets blindly. He fired 3 times. The sedan beside them swerved, its front tire blown out, the driver losing control. It spun across the icy asphalt, crashing into the guardrail with a sickening crunch of metal. Silence rushed back in, broken only by Callie's ragged breathing and the wind howling through the broken windows. Vincent pulled back, his hands immediately checking her. "Are you hit? Callie, look at me. Are you hit?" She shook her head, her ears ringing. I am okay. You are bleeding." There was a cut on his cheek from the flying glass, blood trickling down into his collar, but he didn't seem to notice. He looked at her with an intensity that bordered on madness, the look of a man who had almost lost the only thing that mattered. "Drive," Vincent commanded Rocco, his voice low and lethal. "Get us underground." The atmosphere in the penthouse bunker was suffocating. This wasn't the warm, elegant home where they had decorated the tree. This was a command center under siege. The windows were shuttered with steel blinds. Men with assault rifles stood at every entrance. Callie sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling in her lap. She had seen violence before, Eddie's fists, bar fights, but this was different. This was a war, and she was the cause. She watched as Vincent paced the room, barking orders into a phone. He was stripping his organization to the bone, calling in every favor, every debt. He looked exhausted, the dark circles under his eyes pronounced against his pale skin. But his energy was frantic. He hung up the phone and turned to his mother, who was sitting quietly in the armchair, her face stoic. "The helicopter is on the roof," Vincent said gently. "It will take you to the private airfield. The jet is waiting to take you to the safe house in Sicily. You will be safe there. Mama..." Teresa Moretti stood up, her frailty masked by a lifetime of steel. She cupped her son's face. "Do not die. Vincent, do not make me bury my son. I will be right behind you when this is done," he promised. Teresa turned to Callie. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply took Callie's hand, squeezed it hard, and whispered, "Be strong, child." Then she was gone, escorted by 2 guards. Vincent turned to Callie. The softness he had shown his mother vanished, replaced by a hard, non-negotiable resolve. "There is a second car leaving in 10 minutes, he said. "It is an unmarked sedan. Rocco will drive you to a safe house in Vermont. You will have a new identity. Cash and a passport. You wait there until I call." Callie stood up, her legs shaking. "No." Vincent stopped. "This is not a discussion, Callie. They shot at us in broad daylight. Julian has escalated. Eddie is loose. You are the target." "I am not leaving you," she said, her voice rising. "You sent your mother away. You are sending everyone away. You are planning to stand here and fight them alone. I have my men. You have targets on your back," Callie cried. "If I leave, they will just come for me in Vermont, or they will kill you to get to me. I am done running. Vincent, I ran from Eddie for 2 years, and he still found me. Running doesn't work." "I cannot focus if I am worried about you bleeding out on the pavement," Vincent shouted, the control finally snapping. He crossed the room, grabbing her shoulders, shaking her slightly. "Do you not understand? If something happens to you, I am finished. I cannot survive that. And you think I can survive you dying?" Callie grabbed his lapels, pulling him down to her level. Tears streamed down her face, hot and fast. "You think I can just go to Vermont and wait for a phone call that never comes? Don't you dare leave me in silence. Vincent, don't you dare send me away." Vincent stared at her, his chest heaving. The anger in his eyes fractured, revealing the raw, terrifying fear beneath. He made a sound, half groan, half sob, and pushed her backward. They stumbled into the dark hallway, away from the eyes of the guards. Vincent pinned her gently against the wall, his body caging hers, shielding her from the world. His forehead rested against hers, his breathing ragged. "I never wanted this for you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I wanted to give you a debt-free life. I wanted to save you." "You did save me," Callie whispered back, her hands framing his face, her thumbs brushing away the dried blood on his cheek. "You gave me my life back. But I don't want a life without you in it." Vincent pulled back, looking into her eyes. The darkness of the hallway seemed to wrap around them, making this small space the only reality that existed. "Then stay," he breathed against her lips, but not as a fake wife, not as a contract. He pressed his body flush against hers, his heart hammering against her chest. "Be my wife, Callie," he whispered, the words searing into her skin. "Not just for Christmas. Be mine, for every fight, for every winner, for as long as I have breath in my lungs. Marry me. For real this time." Callie let out a choked sob. "Yes, yes, Vincent." She kissed him then, hard and desperate. It was a kiss full of need and fear, a sealing of a pact that went far beyond any paper contract. He kissed her back with a ferocity that promised violence to anyone who tried to tear them apart, his hands tangled in her hair, holding her steady as the world burned down around them. An hour later, the tears dried, and the war room was silent. "We cannot win a defensive war," Vincent said, looking at the map of the city. "Julian has the numbers. Eddie has the knowledge of where to hurt us. We have to draw them out." "They won't come to a meeting," Rocco grunted, cleaning his weapon. "They know we are dug in." "They won't come for me," Vincent agreed, "but they will come for her." Callie stood at the end of the table. She had changed out of the ruined coat into dark jeans and a heavy sweater. She looked pale, but her eyes were clear. "Eddie thinks I am trapped," she said, her voice steady. "He thinks you bought me. He thinks I am a victim." "You are a victim," Vincent said sharply, in his mind. "So let's use that," Callie countered. "I will call him. I will tell him I want out. I will tell him that you are falling apart, that the fake marriage is crumbling, and I want to make a deal. I will bring him the location of your safe house in exchange for my freedom." "No," Vincent said immediately. "Absolutely not. You are not going near him. He won't believe anyone else." "Vincent," Callie insisted, "he knows my voice. He knows how to scare me. If I sound terrified, which won't be hard, he will buy it. His ego is too big to believe I would choose you over saving my own skin. It is too dangerous," Vincent argued, pacing again. "If he touches you—" "He won't touch me if you are there," Callie said. "We set the meeting, an abandoned place. I go in alone. You and the team are in the shadows. The moment he steps out, you take him." Vincent looked at Rocco. Rocco nodded slowly. It is the only way to get a clean shot at Caro without fighting Julian's entire army. Caro will want to claim her personally. He will come to light on security to keep the glory for himself. Vincent looked back at Callie. He hated it. Every fiber of his being screamed to lock her in a vault, but he looked at the resolve in her jaw, the fire in her eyes. She wasn't the trembling waitress anymore. She was a queen fighting for her kingdom. If he gets within 5 feet of you, Vincent warned, his voice deadly serious, I take the shot. No waiting for intel. No waiting for Julian. I dropped him. Callie nodded. Deal. The meeting place was an old textile factory in the industrial district, a hollowed-out skeleton of brick and iron. The wind whistled through the broken skylights, carrying the scent of rust and snow. Callie stood in the center of the vast floor. She held her phone in her hand, her knuckles white. He is here, Rocco's voice crackled in her tiny earpiece. North entrance. 2 guards. He's walking in. Callie took a deep breath. I am not the girl I was, she repeated silently. I am Mrs. Moretti. The heavy metal door creaked open. Eddie walked in. He looked worse than he had at the shipyard. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements twitchy. He wore a heavy coat, one hand tucked inside, resting on a weapon. He stopped 20 feet away, scanning the shadows. Callie, he sneered, his voice echoing in the empty space. You look expensive. I did what I had to do, Callie said, forcing a tremor into her voice. She hugged her arms around herself. I want out, Eddie. He's crazy. He's going to get us all killed. Eddie laughed, stepping closer. And you thought you could just trade him for your life? You think I forgot that you ran? I was scared, she pleaded, backing up a step. I am still scared. Please, just take the information and let me go. Let you go? Eddie's face twisted. He took another step, ignoring the perimeter Vincent had set. You don't get to go. Cal, you belong to me. I wrote it on your wall. Didn't you get my love letter? Please, she whimpered, playing the part. Just take the file. She held out a manila envelope filled with blank paper. Eddie stopped 5 feet away. He looked at the envelope, then up at her face. A cruel, knowing smile spread across his lips. You are lying, he whispered. Callie froze. You are looking at the rafters, Eddie hissed. You are waiting for your knight in shining armor. Before she could react, Eddie lunged. He was faster than they anticipated. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, his hand lashing out to grab a fistful of her hair. Callie screamed as he yanked her head back, using her body as a human shield against the darkness where Vincent waited. Come out, Moretti! Eddie screamed, pressing the cold barrel of a gun against Callie's temple. Come out or I paint the floor with her brains. Vincent, don't, Callie sobbed, clawing at Eddie's arm. Shut up! Eddie struck her across the face with his free hand, a brutal backhand that split her lip. That was the catalyst. Drop her! Vincent exploded from the shadows of the mezzanine like a dark angel of death. He didn't wait for a clean line of sight. He vaulted over the railing, landing on the concrete floor with a heavy thud, his gun raised. Let her go, Caro, Vincent roared, advancing on them. Back off! Eddie dragged Callie backward, tightening his grip on her hair until she cried out in pain. I will do it. I swear to God. Gunfire erupted from the upper levels. Julian's men, hidden in the structure, just as Vincent's were, opened fire. It was a double trap. Chaos consumed the factory. Bullets sparked off the iron pillars. Rocco and his team returned fire from the catwalks, pinning Julian's men down. In the center of the storm, Vincent didn't look at the shooters. He only looked at Eddie. I'm going to kill you, Vincent said calmly, stepping forward into the open, ignoring the bullets whizzing past him. Stay back, Eddie panicked. He shifted his aim from Callie to Vincent, firing a wild shot. Callie felt the recoil vibrate through Eddie's body. She saw Vincent jerk back, a bloom of red exploding on the white shirt at his side. Vincent, she screamed. Vincent stumbled, clutching his side, but he didn't fall. He didn't even slow down. The pain seemed to fuel him. Eddie, terrified by the man who wouldn't die, tried to fire again, but Callie moved. Driven by pure instinct, she slammed her heel down onto Eddie's instep with all her strength and threw her elbow back into his stomach. It wasn't enough to incapacitate him, but it was enough to loosen his grip. Callie threw herself to the ground, rolling behind a heavy wooden crate. "No!" Eddie shrieked, raising his gun to shoot her while she was down. Bang! A single shot rang out. Louder than the rest. Eddie stiffened. A small, neat hole appeared in the center of his forehead. He looked surprised for a fraction of a second, and then he collapsed backward, dead before he hit the concrete. Vincent stood over him, his gun smoking, his hand pressed to his bleeding side. "Clear!" Rocco shouted from above. "They are running! Julian is gone!" The gunfire ceased as abruptly as it had started. Julian, seeing his pawn dead and his ambush failing, had cut his losses and fled. Vincent dropped his gun. He swayed, his knees giving out. "Vincent!" Callie scrambled out from behind the crate. She didn't care about the blood or the dead body of her ex-boyfriend just feet away. She ran to Vincent, catching him as he sank to the floor. "I have got you," she sobbed, pressing her hands against the wound in his side. The blood was hot and slick, seeping through her fingers. "I have got you. Stay with me." Vincent looked up at her. His face was gray, beads of sweat standing out on his forehead, but his eyes were clear. He reached up, his hand trembling, to touch her split lip. "He touched you," Vincent rasped, his voice sounding wet. "It doesn't matter," Callie cried, rocking him. "You are hurt. Rocco, get the medic. Rocco." "Callie," Vincent whispered, his eyes fluttering shut. "I told you. I would burn the city." "You did," she wept, kissing his forehead, his cheeks, desperate to keep him awake. "You did. Now please, just stay alive to see the ashes." Vincent's hand slid from her cheek to the floor. His breathing grew shallow. Rocco slid down the ladder, skidding to a halt beside them. He took one look at the wound and cursed. "We have to move him. Now. The hospital is not safe. We will go to the vet." "The vet?" Callie screamed hysterically. "He handles the dogs," Rocco said, lifting Vincent's unconscious body with a grunt of exertion. "He knows how to stitch a bullet hole without calling the cops. Move! Callie, drive the truck!" Callie scrambled to her feet, wiping the blood from her hands onto her jeans. She took one last look at Eddie Caro's lifeless body, the monster who had haunted her nightmares for years, now just a heap of nothing on a dirty floor. She felt nothing for him, no pity, no fear. She turned and ran toward the truck, her heart beating solely for the man bleeding out in the back seat, the man who had kept his promise, the man who was no longer pretending. The return to consciousness was not a sudden awakening, but a slow, painful climb out of a dark well. The first thing Vincent Moretti felt was the fire in his side, a dull, throbbing ache that radiated through his ribs with every shallow breath. The second thing he felt was the hand holding his. It was a small hand, warm and firm, anchoring him to the world of the living. He forced his heavy eyelids open. The light in the room was dim, filtered through heavy blinds. It was not a hospital. He knew the sterile, fluorescent glare of the city emergency rooms too well. This was a private suite, likely one of the secure clinics the family kept on retainer for situations that required discretion over paperwork. The air smelled of antiseptic and expensive lilies. Vincent turned his head, the movement sending a spike of pain down his spine. Callie was there. She was curled into an uncomfortable-looking armchair pulled right up to the bedside, her head resting on the mattress near his hip. Her dark hair was messy, fanning out over the white sheets. She was still wearing the blood-stained sweater from the factory, her face scrubbed clean but pale, even in sleep. Her brow was furrowed, her grip on his fingers tight, as if she were afraid he would slip away if she let go for a second. Vincent watched her for a long time, his heart aching more than his wound. He remembered the factory. He remembered the fear in her eyes when Eddie had the gun to her head, and the way she had looked at him when he fell, not with the horror of a civilian seeing violence, but with the desperate, fierce love of a woman trying to save her man. He squeezed her hand weakly. Callie gasped, jerking awake instantly. Her eyes, wide and rimmed with red, found his. "Vincent?" Her voice was a croak, unused for hours. "Hey," he rasped. His throat felt like he had swallowed broken glass. "Oh, thank God." Callie scrambled up, leaning over him, her hands hovering over his chest as if she wanted to hug him but was terrified of hurting him. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled over immediately. "You are awake," Rocco said. "He said you lost so much blood." "It takes more than a low-level thug to kill me," Vincent whispered, trying to smile. It came out as a grimace. "Are you safe? Is Julian—" "Julian is gone," Callie said, brushing the hair back from his forehead. Her fingers were trembling. "He ran. Rocco and the team secured the perimeter. You are safe. We are safe." Vincent closed his eyes. Letting out a breath he felt like he had been holding since he walked into that shipyard. Good. The door to the suite opened softly. Vincent tensed instinctively, but Callie put a hand on his shoulder. "It is just your mother," she murmured. Teresa Moretti walked in, leaning heavily on a cane. She looked older than she had just days ago, the stress of the attack etched into the lines of her face. But when she saw Vincent's open eyes, the relief that washed over her was profound. She walked to the other side of the bed. She didn't say a word. She simply leaned down and kissed Vincent's cheek, her hand cupping his jaw with a strength that defied her illness. "I told you not to make me bury you," she whispered sternly, though her eyes were wet. "I listened to my mother," Vincent managed to say. Teresa straightened up and looked at Callie. For the first time since they had met, there was no suspicion in the matriarch's gaze. There was no assessment of Callie's worthiness or pedigree. There was only deep, abiding gratitude. "The doctor said he would not have made it to the table if you had not kept pressure on the wound," Teresa said softly. "Rocco told me what you did. You went into that factory alone." "I had to," Callie said, looking down at Vincent. Teresa reached across the bed and took Callie's free hand. "I bless the day you walked into his life as a lie. Callie, but today, I thank God for the truth of you. You gave my son a reason to live. That is a debt I can never repay." Vincent watched the two women, the one who had given him life and the one who had saved it. He felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it nearly choked him. "Mama," Vincent said, his voice hardening slightly, "leave us for a moment." Teresa looked at him, seeing the darkness gathering in his eyes. She nodded knowingly, squeezed Callie's hand one last time, and quietly exited the room. Silence stretched between them. Callie sat back down, but the atmosphere had shifted. She sensed the wall going up before he even spoke. "You have to go," Vincent said. Callie froze. "What?" "Julian is still out there," Vincent said, staring at the ceiling because he couldn't bear to look at the hurt on her face. "He knows you are my weakness now. The element of surprise is gone. As long as you are with me, you are a target. I have a plane waiting. It will take you to Europe. I have accounts set up in Switzerland. You will never have to work again." "Stop," Callie said. "I'm trying to keep you alive," Vincent snapped, wincing as the shout pulled at his stitches. "Look at you. Callie, you are covered in blood. My blood. Yesterday you almost died because of me. I cannot do this. I cannot watch you bleed for my sins." He turned his head to face her, his eyes pleading. "Please, just go. Let me finish this war alone. Once it is safe, maybe—" "No." The word was sharp, cutting through his defenses. Callie stood up. She didn't look like the scared girl in the waitress uniform anymore. She looked like a woman who had walked through fire and come out forged in steel. "You don't get to choose for me anymore, Vincent," she said, her voice shaking with anger, not fear. "You hired me to play a part. I did. You asked me to trust you. I did. But we are past the contract now. I am not an employee you can fire to save on insurance costs." She leaned over the bed, placing her hands on the mattress, trapping him with her gaze. "I love you," she said fiercely. "I love you, and I killed the ghost of my past to be with you. I am not going to Europe. I am not going to hide in a Swiss chalet while you fight for your life. If you want to push me away, you're going to have to drag me out of this room yourself. And seeing as you can barely lift your head, I don't like your odds." Vincent stared at her. He saw the stubborn set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes that matched his own. He realized then that he hadn't just fallen for a beautiful woman, he had fallen for his equal. He let out a defeated, jagged sigh. He lifted his hand, tangling his fingers in hers. "You are stubborn," he whispered. "I learned from the best," she countered, leaning down to press her forehead against his. "We finished this together." The war against Julian Price was not fought in the streets with guns and knives. That was the old way, the way that had almost gotten them killed. Vincent, directing from his recovery bed, and Callie, standing in the spotlight, chose a different weapon, the truth. 2 weeks later, Callie Ruiz walked up the steps of the district attorney's office. She was flanked by Rocco and 4 other guards, but she walked with her head high. She wore a stark white suit that Vincent had bought for her, armor made of silk and wool. The press cameras flashed like lightning, a chaotic storm of shutters and shouting reporters. "Mrs. Moretti, is it true? Did Julian Price order the hit? Are you safe?" Callie stopped at the top of the stairs. She turned to the microphones. She didn't look at the reporters. She looked directly into the lens of the main news camera, knowing Julian was watching from whatever hole he was hiding in. She testified, not as a helpless victim, but as a witness. She laid out the extortion, the threats, the attack at the factory. She gave the police the recordings Vincent's team had salvaged from Eddie's phone, recordings that linked Julian directly to the attempted murder and the racketeering operations in the South Ward. It was a dangerous gamble. By testifying, she put a target on her back for the rest of the underworld, but it also made her untouchable in a different way. She was too public, too visible. If anything happened to her now, the entire city would know exactly who did it. The fallout was swift. With the police manhunt intensifying and his assets frozen by the investigation Vincent's lawyers had triggered, Julian's allies abandoned him. A week later, he was arrested trying to board a cargo ship to Brazil. While the courts dealt with Julian, Vincent dealt with his own house. He didn't heal quickly, but he healed strongly. As soon as he could stand, he called a meeting of the organization. There were no shouting, no public executions. Vincent simply sat at the head of the table, Callie at his right hand, and laid out the new world order. Those who had wavered, like Mateo, were given a choice: retirement with a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement, or exile. Mateo, seeing the cold unity between Vincent and Callie, took the money and left the city before sunset. Vincent kept his word to his mother. He began the arduous process of legitimizing the Moretti empire. He sold off the illicit shipping routes, invested heavily in real estate and tech, and turned the family business into something that didn't require bulletproof glass on the bedroom windows. It was not an overnight change. It was a slow, grinding shift, like turning a massive ship at sea. But for the first time in his life, Vincent wasn't steering the ship alone. Christmas Eve arrived with a silence that blanketed Northbridge in white. The Moretti Winter Estate sat high in the mountains, far away from the noise of the city and the ghosts of the factory. It was a place of stone and timber, built to withstand the harshest storms. Tonight, however, there was no storm. The sky was a clear, endless canvas of stars, the moon reflecting off the pristine snow that covered the grounds. Inside, the great fireplace roared, casting a golden glow over the room. A massive Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated not with the perfect, symmetric ornaments of a designer, but with a mix of heirlooms and new, slightly lopsided baubles Callie had bought. Vincent stood by the window, looking out at the snow. He wore a dark suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked healthy again, the color back in his face, though he still moved with a slight stiffness from the healing wound in his side. "You are brooding," Callie's voice came from behind him. He turned. The breath left his lungs. She was wearing a dress of deep emerald green silk that hugged her curves and flowed to the floor. It was simple, elegant, and stunning. "I am not brooding," Vincent said, walking toward her. "I am reflecting. That is just a fancy word for brooding." She smiled, handing him a glass of wine. Vincent took the glass but set it down on the mantelpiece. He took her hands instead. "I was thinking about the contract, the one we made in the library." Callie's smile faded slightly. "That feels like a lifetime ago." "It was," Vincent agreed. "We were different people then. I was a man looking for a shield. You were a woman looking for a lifeline. And now? She asked softly. Now, Vincent said, his thumbs brushing over her knuckles. I am just a man looking at the only thing that matters. He pulled a coat off the armchair, a heavy, fur-lined parka. Come with me. Outside. Vincent, it is 10 degrees below zero. She laughed. Trust me. He wrapped her in the coat and led her out the French doors onto the stone terrace. The cold air bit at their cheeks, crisp and clean. The silence of the mountains was absolute, a sacred hush that made the world feel like it consisted only of the two of them. Vincent led her to the edge of the terrace, where the view opened up to a valley of sleeping pine trees dusted with silver moonlight. He stopped and turned to face her. He reached into his pocket. Callie's heart skipped a beat. She watched as he pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't the prop ring from the vault, the flashy diamond meant to dazzle society matrons. He opened it. Inside sat a ring of breathtaking simplicity, a vintage gold band set with a deep, blood-red ruby. Surrounded by smaller diamonds, it looked like a heart. It looked like a promise. Vincent lowered himself onto one knee in the snow. He ignored the cold. His eyes locked on hers. Vincent, Callie gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The first time I asked you to wear my name, Vincent said, his voice low and steady in the winter air. It was a transaction. I bought your time. I bought your smile. I thought I could buy peace for my mother without paying any price myself. He took a breath, the mist forming a cloud in front of his lips. I was a fool. You cannot buy what you gave me, Callie. You gave me your courage when I was afraid. You gave me your loyalty when I didn't deserve it. You gave me your blood when I was bleeding out on a concrete floor. Callie was crying now, hot tears tracking down her cold cheeks. I begged you once for a lie, Vincent whispered, holding the ring up to her. Now I am begging you for the truth. Marry me, Callie. Be my wife in every way that matters. Let me spend the rest of my life making up for the way we started. He waited, kneeling in the snow, the most powerful man in the city, humbled by the love of the woman standing before him. Callie looked at the ring, then down at him. She saw the scars of his past and the hope of his future. She saw the man who had whispered commands in her ear, and the man who had taken a bullet for her. She dropped to her knees in the snow in front of him. Ignoring the ruin of her silk dress, she cupped his face in her hands. Yes, she sobbed, nodding frantically. Yes, Vincent. She leaned in close, her lips brushing against his ear, her voice trembling with a mixture of laughter and tears. Only if you promise, she whispered, echoing the moment that had started it all. To always whisper your price against my neck. Vincent let out a laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that echoed off the mountains. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. The price is everything I have, he vowed, his voice rough with emotion. My life, my soul. It is all yours. He pulled her into him, and they kissed beneath the falling snow. It wasn't a stage kiss for a charity ball. It wasn't a desperate kiss in a shower or a fearful kiss in a hallway. It was a kiss of arrival. The wind howled softly around them, carrying the scent of pine and winter. But between them, there was only heat. The danger of the world was still out there. There would always be wolves in the dark, but as Vincent wrapped his arms around his wife, he knew they would never breach the walls he had built around her. Inside the house, the lights from the Christmas tree flickered warm and bright, casting a glow on the snow that looked, finally, like peace. Thank you so much for listening to Be My Wife Just for Christmas. Mafia Boss begged her, then whispered his price against her neck. I hope you enjoyed Vincent and Callie's journey from a dangerous contract to a love worth fighting for. I would love to know where you're listening from. Please leave a comment down below and tell me which country you call home. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more passionate, thrilling, and emotional tales. Don't forget to share your thoughts on the ending in the comments section. I can't wait to hear what you think.